Sounds good.
All right, so I'm going to send you back to the green room for a second. Test 1 2, testing 1 2. That is high. Testing 1 2, test 1 2, testing 1 2 3. 1 1 1. Okay. Back. Here we go. Welcome back, Seahawks fans. It is the Field Goals Podcast preview edition. I am Dan Viens, and we are looking ahead to Week 4. The 1-2 Seahawks taking on the 1-2 Detroit Lions in Detroit. And for a closer look at what's going on from the Detroit Lions side of things, Chris Perfett of the Pride of the Lions, Pride of Detroit.
Pride of Detroit. Yeah.
Pride of Detroit podcast, our SB Nation counterpart over there. Welcome in, Chris. How you doing?
I'm doing well. I'm getting up on this hazy little morning in my small portion of the valley, thinking about football as one does, and just what's the right mood to have today? Just I don't want to be zenning. That's too stereotypical California, and I am not a California at heart. I am a transplant. I am a wandering vagabond that does not belong on this coast. But like most half Michiganders and Ohioans out there, we are kind of forced to travel to retain our resources. So
Yeah,
I'm surviving. Let's just go with that.
all right. At least you got some sunshine. We have officially turned the page here up in the Pacific Northwest to fall.
I envy you. It was 100 degrees yesterday. I had to blast the AC.
Hey, I can hear it in the background. I got to pack mine up and put it away in the closet for the winter. Of course, as soon as I do that, the first day I do that, it's like 85 degrees and stuffy. And, that's just how it goes here. But let's talk heat as far as it goes with our football teams. Both 1-2, as I said, both in last place in their division, but only a game out in their respective divisions. But let's talk about these Detroit Lions, because first of all, something happens every year after Hard Knocks airs, right? Usually the team that's featured on Hard Knocks becomes kind of the darling of the league. Right? They highlight the fun personalities, and in this case, there was no lack of those, especially coming from the head coach there and the impression that he made on that show. And you tend to see, at least I have in my experiences, guys get drafted a little higher in fantasy coming off of Hard Knocks and things like that because there's some familiarity. This team has been entertaining and interesting through the first 3 games, 2 losses by a combined 7 points. And coming off a win last week, or a loss last week, similar to what we experienced here in Seattle, that you feel like the Lions missed some opportunities and should have won. Let's start kind of with the big picture view. Where do you feel like the Lions are so far right now as we sit today? And we'll talk some specifics in a minute. Specifically, we'll talk about the injury report. But just a general overview of where you think the Lions are 3 weeks into Dan Campbell's second season.
Well, you mentioned Hard Knocks, and I feel like, going back to the darling status, that almost kind of got started. I think that's normally true of Hard Knocks. For the Lions, it started a little before that, just because of who Dan Campbell is, and he's divisive. I've heard from plenty of former players in the media who are both fans, some who think it's corny, more fans than people who think it's corny, though, and it's definitely we'll just start right there. It's definitely a complete 180 from the guy who was in here before that, Matt Patricia, who is a jackwagon to the highest degree, and I am glad that New England is learning just exactly what kind of idiocy jackwagon that man can bring to an organization. But Dan Campbell wasn't just there to just be a 180 for the attitude. He installed a lot of former players who became these coaches, who have familiarities with what teams go through that need to grow like the Detroit Lions have. It's a grand experiment that I have been utterly fascinated by. I don't know if it'll work at the end of the day, but it seems to, at the very least, get people very energetic.
No.
The other players that get, turned into darlings, though, were also players that people I guess they're stars, and they should be considered stars. And I know everyone thinks, oh, Detroit, what do you care? It's like, okay, this isn't 2008 anymore. And
Yeah.
when the Lions beat the Washington Commanders, it does psychic damage to teams to still think, and fans who still think it's 2008. Guess what? Lions win sometimes. And when they win, you can't lose your mind and then think, you know what, we should hire Scott Frost as our defensive coordinator. Commanders fans were thinking that, and I saw a Commanders fan say that. But guess, as to those stars, like, look, Amon-Ra St. Brown is still a reception machine. If you play PPR fantasy and you have him, congratulations.
Yeah, you're pretty happy.
DeAndre Swift, while he was healthy through the first game and a half, has been a revelation on the ground game for an element that the Lions have not had since damn near Barry Sanders. I don't even know if Reggie Bush even qualifies. Like, Lions just generally has never had a ground game. To have DeAndre Swift rifling through the field is something very new and very interesting. And this offensive line has long been the strength that the Lions want to establish. So there are keys there that I think that most fans outside of Detroit are still kind of getting used to and trying to not fall into the trap of, again, I was watching another Commanders fan because I enjoy Schadenfreude when the Lions beat a team, because as I said, it does psychic damage. That, I saw them, he just kept referring to him on Twitch as like the stinky Lions. And it's like, okay, cool. Guess what? Your team is stinky too. Like after a point, you're down here in the mud with us. So yeah, the Lions could be, to the other point, the Lions probably could be 2-1, are 3-0. This is the game we always play in the NFL. The woulda, shoulda, coulda. This league has developed itself into this point where every game is 80% of games is going to come down to the last few drives, the last few seconds, just because of how they've been able to legislate parity into the bones of the games itself, right? Like they roared back against the Eagles after being slapped around and fell short. The Vikings game was a little bit different. That was a lot of unforced errors that really, really bit the Lions and got some people rightly upset at Dan Campbell. Like, this is a guy who was going for it on fourth down throughout that entire game, and suddenly near the end of the game starts to play very conservatively, tries to kick a 54, 53-yard field goal off the leg of Austin Seibert, who I don't think has made it from that distance before and had already missed one that day. And in general was just making some really awful decisions regarding the play clock. And he owned up to it. He owned up to it because Dan Campbell owns up to all his mistakes in a loss. But it's a game that sucks because that was well in hand for the Detroit Lions. But that's kind of always been the story for the Detroit Lions, even going back to last year. Their record against the spread, if you're a gambling guy, is very good. And the reason why their record against the spread is very good is because they're always in games like this. They're always in games, and they don't always lose those games, even though they lost a lot of them last year.
Okay, right off the top, let's talk about the injury list because it's pretty significant. A lot of the names you just mentioned are on that list, and when we talk about the stars of this team, especially on offense, with the exception of Tracy Walker being placed on injured reserve, team captain, starting safety with an Achilles, he's out for the year. But a lot of those guys on offense, Swift, Hawkinson, St. Brown, a lot of the receiving core, DJ Chark is banged up. Reynolds might be banged up. Frank Ragnow. Tell me, a lot of those guys didn't practice, but what's the feeling there about how many of those guys might be able to go on Sunday?
Well, I think Amon-Ra St. Brown is probably going to go. The man is made of nothing but...
Damn it.
I was going to say the man is made of nothing but spite and resentment for the world as he just plays hard. So, like, he didn't have practice. Yeah, as you say, he didn't have practice on Wednesday. And I think that's something that I saw last week with the Lions, where if you get banged up, they're going to give you a practice off. But it sounds like he's the one who's trending in the right direction. Okay. A lot of the injuries in the offensive line are a little more troubling. I don't know if we'll see Frank Ragnow. Seeing Jonah Jackson adding to the list kind of gives me pause a little bit. He's not even a starter, and yet we seem to be going deeper and deeper into the bench with this offensive line, which was, again, supposed to be the strength of the Detroit Lions, and yet the interior of this line is getting really banged up, and without Frank Ragnow to really lead them is going to be a problem. Josh Reynolds is the one receiver I'm fairly worried about, just because he's the one who really has the rapport with with quarterback Jared Goff, and Jared Goff likes receivers that he has rapport with. It's what he likes with St. Brown. It's what he likes with Josh Reynolds. It's why DJ Shark, who they just acquired, is still getting to know Jared Goff and hasn't really seen a lot of throws from him because, and he needs to also catch the ones that are thrown to him too. So that's the wide receivers who am I missing? Oh, right. The big one is probably DeAndre Swift.
Yeah.
Who is banged up in multiple ways now. He has an ankle injury and a shoulder injury. And to be honest, like, we saw the Lions almost putting him on a pitch clock during a pitch count during the Vikings game. Jamal Williams got the lion's share of that, no pun intended, 20 carries in that game to DeAndre Swift's 7. And if Swift can't, look, Swift's not a feature back, but Jamal Williams should not be getting more than double the carries that DeAndre Swift does at the end of the game if DeAndre Swift is healthy. That's the one element I think, that's the one key injury I feel like more than anything right now I'm worried about is DeAndre Swift, because it just takes away a massive element to the game that the Lions absolutely leaned on during the Washington and Philadelphia games.
Yeah, Lions
Swift changes the game for them. He gives them explosive play power that Jamal Williams just... I love Jamal Williams, but he just doesn't have that explosive play power or the ability to cut to the outside like that.
8.5 yards per carry for Swift so far this season. The Lions are third in the NFL at 170 rushing yards per game. That is of huge concern to the Seahawks defense and their fans as they've watched that defense get gashed, especially on the ground 3 weeks into the season. The Lions, and this is what you touched on it. This is what's interesting to me about this Lions team is, the figurehead is Dan Campbell, and he's this tough, blue collar, former tight end, gruff. I remember that first press conference he had where you talk about, people thinking it's corny. I can't remember exactly.
Oh, everyone remembers the first press conference, the kneecaps line and everything. We're gonna bite you in the kneecaps.
It came off as contrived, but then when you watch Hard Knocks, it feels like more of just who he is. But that's sort of the perception you have of their offense. But then yet they have all these flashy weapons in Swift and St. Brown. Jameson Williams hasn't even seen the field yet, and Hawkinson and guys like that. And it's interesting. But then you see them running the football and dominating in that fashion, in addition to these flashy weapons. As a Seahawks fan, someone who covers Seahawks, with the issues we're having on defense, I would think even with the injuries, Lions fans would be feeling pretty good about this offense going up against the Seahawks this week.
Well, I think that it all starts with, and I know this is something that I think Seahawks fans can probably relate to as well, it all starts with the offensive line for Detroit. And that's always been what this coaching staff has preached, that it's offensive line, defensive line. It starts in the trenches, and that sounds completely caveman, but I feel like in our, attempts to rewrite football for the 21st century, for the second decade of the 21st century, that we've almost come around completely back to trenches warfare as the advanced way, the proper way to do things. Like, that's Kyle Shanahan's road to success too.
Yeah.
That's what the Lions invested in when they've, got Penei Sewell and they've got Taylor Decker and they've got Frank Ragnow. But that's also what allows them to do all these things with that offense, because it starts right there. You establish the run through what the offensive line can give you. We've seen guys, even guys like backup, tackle converted to guard Dan Skipper, who was kind of the star of the Washington game. He's running in convoy with DeAndre Swift for his touchdown and throwing up blocks. Like this offensive line makes its presence known, and they've gotten better at pass protection too, which is good, because when you have a quarterback like, say, Jared Goff, who needs everything to really work around him to a good degree, it's good to have that, because suddenly, like, you get better pass protection. You get a more comfortable quarterback for a guy who is Jared Goff, who Seahawks fans are familiar with Jared Goff.
Very familiar.
He's not his 2020 self. He's not, like, 2020 isn't exactly who he is, but I don't think we're ever going to see a Pro Bowl level out of him again. But that's fine. Like, the Lions have worked very hard, especially with the new offensive coordinator, Ben Johnson, who was a tight ends coach. He tailored this offense specifically, knowing that he had that offensive line to really lean on. He tailored it specifically for Jared Goff, and Jared Goff can command and offense at different levels of the field, and that's why he has such a plenitude of weapons. And that's why, like, there's no just one weapon that you just cover up and take it away from the Detroit Lions, because it's hard to do that. You want to take away Josh Reynolds, you want to take away DJ Shark, that's fine. Amon-Ra St. Brown's still out there, and nobody considers the slot receiver. But, start taking away Amon-Ra St. Brown, and suddenly they've got other things too. Like, it's a multi-headed threat, and it's definitely their strength right now. It's just a matter of keeping all those pieces healthy, and when does the bow break on that offensive line?
I want to ask you a question more geared towards the future, and then we'll get back to this game specifically. But in regards to Jared Goff, what's the general sense? His contract is structured in such a way the Lions can move on after this offseason without a lot of damage to the salary cap. Do you think that's the plan? Are they hunting for a quarterback in this what looks to be a really strong quarterback draft next year?
This is the sword of Damocles that hangs over the head of everyone in Detroit. And I know I just invoked mythology, and I know that's not a great idea considering the current U.S. educational system.
It works with football.
Yeah. It's for those who don't know, we are talking about an actual sword hanging over your head that might fall at any given moment. So don't breathe. But it is the question that the Detroit Lions are working on right now, because they have a lot of faith in Jared Goff, which should rightly scare a lot of Lions fans. On the other hand, Jared Goff has played fine. He's played completely fine this year so far. He's played even at he played fine late last year too, once the Lions basically told Anthony Lynn, you cannot run the offense anymore, and Dan Campbell took over play calling, and Ben Johnson put in the system near the end of that year, especially in the last four games of the season or so. Like, you saw a marked improvement in Jared Goff. I don't think that's enough to really stake the future on, but I said before the season on the POD cast that everything right now is perfect for Jared Goff. He's got a great offensive line. He's got a complimentary run game. He's got a lot of good offensive weapons, so there's really no excuse for him to play bad. And even when he had what is on the stat sheet a bad game against the Vikings, I saw a marked improvement out of him on stuff like, say, when pressure was coming, Jared Goff, great example. When pressure used to come on Jared Goff, he would panic, he would start to reel back, and usually at that point, like straight back. Mm-hmm. And usually at that point, pressure would then sack him for a 10-yard loss. And it was brutal, and I wanted to tear what remaining hair I have left out of my head every single damn time. This time, though, I saw him scrambling. I saw him making a very awkward slide, but he would read the field and, know when to tuck and run and not completely wilt under that pressure, and learn how to extend the plays. The question is, though, do you want to keep Jared Goff for a long time? I don't know. I would prefer not to. Yeah. I think, to the contract question, they're going to get at least one more year out of Jared Goff, regardless, because even if you bring in a new quarterback, you're going to want to follow the system that other teams are doing, which is to sit him, to have him, learn the system, sit on the roster, like they did with Patrick Mahomes, or they're doing with Malik Willis, or they're doing with Kenny Pickett. That's smart. It's ideal rather than there's no one in this draft, I feel like, who is a Trevor Lawrence you can just throw to the fire right away. I don't think the other problem too is, I don't know if the Lions are going to be in striking distance of some of these guys. I was a big proponent of Anthony Richardson, and then I've seen him play a lot of football, and I'm not sure I'm much of a fan of Anthony Richardson anymore. No. Bryce Young, C.J. Stroud, those guys are fantastic, but name me the quarterbacks from Ohio State and Alabama that have succeeded at the NFL. There's a lot of interesting quarterback prospects in this draft. I'm not sure I'm ready. The Lions are going to be in a position for it, or B, it's going to really work out. Drafting a quarterback is so damn hard. It's so damn hard. So Jared Goff's a nice fallback plan. I don't know if I like it long term at all, but I think people also forget that Jared Goff is also, oh God, I don't even think he's 27. He's only 27.
Yeah, it's easy to forget how young he was when he was coming out. And it's interesting when you talk about how he's been adequate, right? It made me think, he sort of reminds me of peak Matt Hasselbeck from his time in Seattle. Like I used to argue all day long with my dad, who thought Matt Hasselbeck sucked and they should move on from any given moment. And my argument was always, okay, name the quarterbacks in the league that are better, and he would invariably name 10 to 15 guys. And my follow-up question would be, well, okay, now how are you going to get one of those guys? That Matt Hasselbeck was good enough to win with the pieces around him when they were operating effectively. Yeah, I mean, there's this perception here in Seattle that Jared Goff stinks. He's terrible. It's because we'd had the opportunity to take advantage of some of his weaknesses during his time here. But he seems to be playing well, and that offense seems to be operating efficiently. And I wanted to ask the question because there's certainly some needs on defense in Detroit as well.
Yes,
the number 2 overall pick in the draft last year, Aiden Hutchinson, the defensive end out of Michigan, 3 sacks on the season, all happening in the first half of, was it the Commanders game?
Yes, he got 3 sacks in the first half against Washington. That's right.
Yeah, but lots of issues on that side of the ball, giving up 31 points a game. That's dead last in the league, 28th in yards allowed. And they're very consistent, 25th in the league against the pass, 27th against the run. And now you lose Tracy Walker. Are we looking at a shootout here on Sunday?
I think that's going to be dependent upon how deep the Seahawks go, and I think it's dependent on several other things too. I'll start with Aiden Hutchinson, though, who I enjoyed watching him in the Commanders game, and I think I've been kind of critical of Aiden Hutchinson, but I also understand he's a rookie, and rookie, especially at defensive end, especially the way Aiden Hutchinson plays, he gets very aggressive, and so there's been a lot of times, especially in the Philadelphia game, where you'd see him in the backfield and he would just be trying to get after Jalen Hurts. But A, Jalen Hurts is mobile,
right,
very mobile, and B, just Aiden Hutchinson's aggression causes him to overshoot sometimes. I think eventually that's a rookie problem. That's not a Aiden Hutchinson problem. That's a rookie problem. That's getting used to the NFL, and I think Aiden Hutchinson can eventually do that. And he's got someone like Charles Harris, who often operates off the opposite edge, and both of them together work out very well in applying pressure. Now, obviously, they didn't really get to Kirk Cousins too much in the Minnesota game, but they still applied plenty of pressure. It's just a matter of making sure Aiden continues to grow. If there's going to be anything that's going to stop a particular shootout, it's going to be based on not as much there, but the defensive backs. You mentioned Tracy Walker is out. That hurts them. That hurts the Lions for a lot of different reasons, mostly because their depth in DBs is just not good. You're kind of leaning on Amani Oruwariye, who should be your best cornerback, but for whatever reason, he pulled like 5 of the Lions' 7 penalties against the Minnesota Vikings, and it's worrying. I hope that's just a blip, but Oruwariye is, he's a great corner. Walker's a safety. I don't know what you really do at safety other than just play Will Harris and some of the depth and pray. But I think what's going to come down to is, I think the name to keep an eye out for is Jeff Okudah, who was the Lions, I believe, 4th overall draft pick from years back. I'm a 3rd, excuse me. And what people need to know about him is he's not jumping off the stat sheets because he's not getting a bunch of interceptions. But Jeff Okudah, through his first 3 games, shut down Devonta Smith. He shut down Tracy McLaurin until he had to come out of the game with some cramping. He shut down Justin Jefferson last week to the tune of Jefferson, I think, only had 3 receptions on 6 targets and 14 yards. Like Jeff Okudah, this was a guy who suffered an Achilles injury last year. People thought he was done or they'd have to convert him to safety, and he didn't play well his rookie year under Matt Patricia because Matt Patricia's an idiot and doesn't know where to play cornerbacks at all for any reason. And Jeff Okudah's also a rookie, but people want to throw him under the bus. But Jeff Okudah my point is that Jeff Okudah and the Lions don't shadow people, but if you're on the side of the ball with Jeff Okudah, he's going to make your life a lot miserable. So I think that's the one thing on their defense that's going to be working to their favor. Overall, though, it's a matter of like the things that have made it hard for the Lions is two different things on those shootouts. One, Kirk Cousins throws very well, especially in that time slot. That 1 p.m. Eastern time slot's a very weird time for him. He just seems to work well. The other thing too is like we were learning that Jalen Hurts is incredibly good this year.
Yep.
So I don't know if Geno Smith, and I loved Geno Smith's little dialogue at the end of his first game, but I don't know if Geno Smith measures up to these other quarterbacks, and the Lions are going to bring pressure on the quarterback and take away your best weapon, and that's the matter of if you can overcome those, then yeah, it'll be high scoring.
Well, it was interesting, and I was going to ask you about the scheme there, whether Okudah would travel with DK Metcalf. I don't know if you saw this yesterday, but DK was asked about Okudah and might have provided a little bit of bulletin board material, was asked about how well he's played and about specifically how he played against Justin Jefferson and whether he's concerned about that. And DK basically said, well, he's got safety help. It's not like he's shutting guys down by himself. So we'll keep an eye on that matchup certainly on Sunday with Okudah going up against DK Metcalf.
So I mean, there were times where Jefferson would get doubled with some safety help, but guess what? That's Justin Jefferson, and
right.
I think the actual count for the double teams was a lot less than people are because we feel that question too, because we still have people who said that about in Detroit about Okudah. It's like, isn't Jefferson getting doubled? It's like, yes, but less than you think. Okudah was out there alone with him sometime. Like Okudah's, it's Okudah. I think, Okudah's good is my point, and like hopefully he continues to be good. He's a good story to root for, especially since a lot of people read him off way too quickly.
It'll be interesting to see if Smith and the Seahawks offense attacks him at all, because what we've seen from the Seahawks offense through the first 3 weeks is lots of 3 tight end set, and that's kind of been the foundation of their passing game, and they're using all 3 of them. And so, your nickel guys and your linebackers are going to have to get out and cover. And but Smith hasn't been shy about feeding the ball to Metcalf even when he is covered, so that might be the most fun matchup to watch. If DeAndre Swift is unable to go, are we looking at just a heavy dose of Jamal Williams, or is there some other depth there?
I think they would probably lean a little more in the passing game, but yeah, it's just I think at that point it's just Jamal Williams, and there's nothing wrong with Jamal Williams. The man runs hard like a beast. We've had him on our podcast a couple times. The man is a gem, like always insanely positive, a massive anime fan. He promised me he would do a Ginyu squad pose at some point, and he has not done that, unfortunately. He got his touchdown against the Vikings and didn't do that, but hopefully one of these days I'll get that, or like some JoJo's Bizarre Adventure or something. But he's a gem.
Wasn't he the one in I think it was the first episode of Hard Knocks where he gave that impassioned, like the big speech at the end of practice? He was crying. Wasn't that Jamal Williams?
Yes, it was. And the funny thing is, so we interviewed him back in 2020 when he had just come in from Green Bay, and he was that way. And I had not seen that element of Jamal Williams before than what I was on Hard Knocks. And you could tell that I think he took that year where the Lions went 3-13-1 very hard. It went hard. He would always preach. He preached us in 2020 before the season about positive competition is how he was his turn of phrase. He liked this idea where it's like, I'm going out there and I'm going to try to beat you with a smile on my face. That was a different side of Jamal Williams, and I think it helps his aggression quite well. But yeah, no, they'll probably just they'll feed Jamal because they want this. They need the play action to work. They need the ground game to work. It complements things. Nobody wants to go back to the days of, people want to go back to the days of Matt Stafford, but they don't want to go back to the days where Matt Stafford was throwing 50, 60 times a game or whatever it was.
Yeah.
It's nice to establish the run, as we like to say.
I'm glad you brought that name up. I wanted to get your take. I just was looking at this note because I had completely forgotten about this. But in case Seahawks fans have forgotten, the last time the Seahawks and Lions played was just a few months ago, and it was Russell Wilson's last regular season game as a Seattle Seahawk. It was in Seattle. Russell throws for 236 yards and 4 touchdowns. Rashad Penny ran for 170 yards and 2 scores. It was a 51-29 win. The Seahawks hold the edge overall, 11-5 in just their 16 or 15 meetings since 1976. But as we're dealing with life after Russell Wilson here, potential future Hall of Fame quarterback moving on, although the story's a little different. This was by his design. Detroit had to deal with that last year, watching the ex-girlfriend leave and go somewhere else. And he ends up going and winning a Super Bowl. What did that feel like for Detroit Lions fans watching all that unfold?
Well, Detroit Lions fans are a very diverse group, let's say, in their opinions. And I think half the reason we have a podcast is because we offered a side of the Detroit Lions that was a lot more having fun with the football, but also at the same time not giving in to just massive, overwhelming pessimism that was going around at the time in Detroit. That we allowed ourselves this element, and it's why we exist. But I think, again, that speaks to the fact that everyone has opinions about Stafford, and those things are not one-to-one. I will speak for myself. I will speak for those who I have worked with and know as fans. A lot of the people I know and have been with were happy. We're happy for Stafford because Detroit fans have seen several Detroit sports figures have to move on to win, and you want to see your guys win at the end of the day, be it Justin Verlander or Matthew Stafford. Like, Stafford defined an entire era of Detroit Lions football and was responsible for pulling them out of the quicksand that was the Matt Millen years and the 2008 years and everything. Like, he's also the best quarterback the Lions have ever seen, period. And he's had nothing but nice things to say about the Detroit Lions. He didn't exactly leave this place and just start stomping on Detroit, or it wasn't a messy breakup where he's throwing the offensive line under the bus on the Dan Patrick show or anything. He's never had a bad thing to say about the Detroit Lions, and the Detroit Lions, for their part, got a good deal back on the trade for Matthew Stafford. So I think most people, it wasn't a messy breakup. So I think most people in Detroit were happy for Stafford. Now, they would be happy if he doesn't, do so well this year, just because the draft pick will get a lot better. But at the same time, nobody, I think, roots against Stafford. There's nothing in Stafford's repertoire that makes you root against the man. And I'm sure there's some Detroit fans who would call that soft, and I saw that back when Verlander moved on to the Astros, where there was some free press columnist who was like, "This is why Tigers fans are soft. They're rooting for Justin Verlander to win a World Series." And it's like, go shove it up your cumulus. Holy God, just shut up. Sports are supposed to be there to have fun, and here we are just picking at fans. I don't know. Now, that said, I do know some fans who are like, who cares? He's not a Lion anymore. Why are you guys watching the Super Bowl? Which, again, fair. But if you want to consume your sports like that, I will find you a joyless little chud. But, hey, all power to you.
And you're always going to have that. I mean, fans fall in love with the name on the back of the jersey. There's still fans here who think the Seahawks screwed up by trading Russell, worst trade ever. They still think he walks on water, kind of like he does himself. And it's been interesting. So to see, I wanted to get your perspective on that, because now you're a year and a half after it, and kind of see how the dust settles. And anytime there is a breakup like that, you get the two converging storylines, and you get, what are the Lions? What are the Lions going to do with those draft picks? How are they going to rebuild themselves? And also, you want to see, how your ex-player goes on and what happens there. I think he's always a likable guy, even from the outside looking in. I always like watching the dude play.
Yeah, I think I like him a lot more too, because they're really leaning into his dopey voice with this new Little Caesars commercial too, with the pizza, which is a Detroit. I mean, Little Caesars is a Detroit company too. Yeah. The family owned, and the Ilitch family happens to own 2 of the 4 professional sports teams in Detroit as well, the Tigers and the Red Wings. I wish they wouldn't for the Tigers, but that's another story. Stafford, I think that it was understandable from all sides, because the Lions, were going on to their fourth head coach, that Stafford would have had to be under. That means even more offensive coordinators. I can't even count them at this point. Let's see: Scott Linehan, Mike Lombardi, Jim Bob Cooter, whoever. I think I'm missing someone who used to be a Seattle guy who's down now in
Darryl Bevell.
Jackson. Darryl Bevell, yes,
Yeah.
interim head coach Darryl Bevell, offensive coordinator Darryl Bevell. Like, my point is that Stafford was, from reportedly very tired of just the turnover, which was warranted. But I mean, look, the Lions had their shot when they got rid of Jim Caldwell to have the coach take them to that height with the talent they had, including Stafford at the time. And they went and chose Matt Patricia at the urging of very smart people. And maybe at the time, Matt Patricia on paper was the correct coaching hire. I still didn't like it at the time, even before the reports came out that he had allegedly been indicted by a grand jury in Texas for a sexual assault back in the 90s that was swiftly buried, but was reported in the Detroit News that apparently the Lions didn't know about. And then he just proceeds to just completely, like, I swear to God, I'm sorry I keep using this podcast. I keep going back to Matt Patricia. The man tears me up, and I love that there are still players like Quandre Diggs and Darius Slay who still go out there. I've never seen players who are currently on NFL rosters taking dumps on someone who is currently coaching in the league. Usually people are very buttoned up about their professionalism like that. There's no such reservation when it comes to Matt Patricia.
Well,
but the Patricia eras just represent, and this is part of why Stafford had to leave, is it was a lost, it was basically all the potential of that era was lost. So you had to blow it up from ground zero. Yeah. And for Stafford, he's at that age where he wanted to win a Super Bowl. So he went to LA and won a Super Bowl.
Well, it does look like the Lions are on their way to some cool things. I think they're the most, as I said earlier, that offense, especially if everyone's healthy, is one of the most dynamic and fun offenses to watch in the league, I think, and a lot of cool young stars, and it'll be interesting to see. As a football fan, I hope those guys play on Sunday. Because I want to see that offense. I want to see it operate. I like watching young stars. I can't wait to see Jameson Williams when he's healthy and see what he can do in that offense as well, alongside St. Brown and with a healthy DeAndre Swift. There's a lot of weapons there, and with that offensive line, it feels like they are building something that will be conducive to incorporating a young quarterback into in the future whenever that guy's acquired and whenever it's time to turn that over to him.
Or someone potentially through free agency at this point too, because some quarterbacks are on the move, and I'm not going to sit here and gas myself
more lately than ever. Absolutely.
I'm not going to sit here and start to like gas myself up and slam myself in the head until I believe Lamar Jackson will come to Detroit. But I'm just saying it is a potential, and there is a multiverse theory that says that at some universe Lamar Jackson will be a Detroit Lion, but I'm not going to pretend like we have the particular seed for that. The one thing I think that will make this game exciting is it's still early in the season. The Lions have been competitive in all those games, which means that, and I know Seattle Seahawks fans pride themselves in the noise at Lumen Field, and I appreciate that noise, especially when I was watching on was it Monday Night Football to start the year?
Yeah,
with Geno. Yeah. It was Monday night. Like that
was the loudest crowd in a long time.
That was a very loud crowd.
Yeah.
I say this with due respect and reverence to the Seattle Seahawks fans who believe their place to be one of the loudest places. Ford Field is really loud too when Lions fans really get into it. Now, it's a fickle crowd sometimes. They can bring out the Bronx cheers if things go bad very, very quickly, but that dome is enclosed. I've been in it, and I've seen when it rocks and rolls. Like, it gets very, very loud. It's stymied the Commanders more than a few times on delays of game, just because it can, like, it's that crowd when they are energetic, and I'm pretty sure it's might be another sellout. I could be wrong, but they, like, I don't know. I went on Philadelphia radio the first week, and I was assured by the host there that the Eagles fans were going to take it over, and that did not happen.
No,
that did not happen. Lions fans, especially when they have something to cheer for, show up very well. So I think that'll make this game exciting too, because it's energetic crowd brings Detroit another level at Ford Field.
Well, from our perspective, it's just another week of just rolling out of bed for a 10 a.m. start and seeing what happens, because we just don't know. You know, after years and years of knowing pretty much exactly what you were going to get from Russell Wilson and that Seahawks offense, We have no idea. We have no idea on defense. Pete Carroll's supposed to be a defensive coach, and he's proven that over his tenure here. That defense is getting gashed. He's promising big changes this week. There's talk that they might tweak some of the elements of the new scheme, that there will be some personnel changes, and even though Geno Smith played really well last week, the offense was effective. You don't know a guy like that that's been in the league that long with that kind of track record and that kind of inconsistency. We don't know what he's going to bring. This could be a really entertaining game. I know the Lions are favored at home in this one. I could also see this being, even with the injuries, I could see the Lions really kind of taking control of this one from start to finish.
I think the Lions and the Seahawks are kind of mirror images of themselves right now. That both once upon a time had these, they're both saying goodbye very recently to generation-defining quarterbacks who, and Seattle rode that to a Super Bowl very well, along with a very incredible defense and one of my favorite beatdowns I've ever seen in a Super Bowl. Usually, when you say beatdown in the Super Bowl, I don't really care for it, but
right.
I like watching Peyton Manning get turned into a little piece of paste on the road with a road roller. Like I just enjoy that. I do. He's got that face, but at the same time, I don't know how much this is a quote unquote rebuild, just because Pete Carroll seems to be a strange beast, and I'm a USC guy, so I understand that Pete Carroll has his eccentricities. He's a different breed. He's one of the, as the good doctor would say, one of God's own prototypes. Too rare to live, too weird to die, and at the same time, I think logically the Seahawks are heading towards the same sort of rebuild that the Lions are, where it's like you've got good pieces around here. You see the foundations of what your future could be, but you're going to need someone to steer that at some point with a new quarterback and improved pieces on defense. And just, I think this game's fascinating in that regard. I like it when teams who have kind of the same trials and tribulations play each other, because that's when it gets interesting. That's when the real struggle begins, and I enjoy struggle.
Well, and I felt that way against the Falcons last week too. I thought they were two teams kind of going in the same direction.
Another great team like that.
And I've been saying, for most of this season, now more than ever, we've thrown the word parity around for years, but I think now we're seeing it in the league more than ever, where there just aren't. I don't think you're going to. Well, certainly not this year. Maybe never again. You're not going to see 0-17. Every roster in this league has talent on it. And it's not so much about how good you are. We saw that with the Buffalo Bills last week. It's not about how good you are. It's about how well you play. And on a week in, week out basis, it has more to do with matchup and just how well you show up and execute that day. And it's a mystery. I'm terrible at I play a pool every week where I assign confidence points to the games based on, how confident I am in certain. I'm terrible at it. I'm absolutely terrible at it, because from one week to the next, teams get better, teams get worse, teams make good game plan decisions and bad game plan decisions, or good clock management decisions and bad ones. It's
sometimes the matchup is all that kills you too,
right? Absolutely.
Sometimes it's scheme and everything else. Like
it could be one matchup. It could be one side of the offensive line against that particular part of a front seven. It's to me, it's what makes it enjoyable and fun, because it's just, I think a lack of parity is boring. I think dominance is boring. I think,
listen, nobody wants Alabama. Nobody wants Alabama in this sport. It just college football is its own meme, its own virus, in that it demands perfection every week, and that's fun. I enjoy college football for what it is, but I enjoy the NFL more because of exactly that. I just wish someone would, get that memo to some of the other talking heads out there and tell Colin Cowherd to stop picking the Ravens to go 16-0 or picking the Bills to go 17-0. It's
just
not
when we
that
thought the Bills were going to steamroll everybody, they lose.
They lose to the Dolphins, who are the only undefeated. And by the way, I think this year, it has not been since the 70s where we've had only one undefeated, only two 3-0 teams to start the year, and that was the year of the unbeaten Miami Dolphins. But we're still going back about 50, 60 years into the history books to get to this level as far as this kind of start. It just happens. I think everyone again, I know this is a Detroit Lions fan. every week playing any team, there is a set of fans of every fan base in the NFL. It doesn't matter if they're the Browns, the Bengals, the Patriots, the Commanders. They see the Detroit Lions on the schedule and they assume automatic W. Why?
Sure.
Because it's like with same kind of the deal with Jared Goff. People remember the lowest better than the highest. And for Jared Goff, that was 2020. For the Detroit Lions, it was 2008. Everyone thinks it's still 2008, 14 years ago for the Detroit Lions. It's not. And when the Lions do beat teams, it creates psychic damage, but the league doesn't want teams like the Detroit Lions or the Jacksonville Jaguars to be down forever. And I think they like it when when you look at this schedule and see, hey, there's a lot of 2-1 and 1-2 and 1-1 like with the Colts, which God, I don't like the Colts, but yeah, it's like even the vaunted NFC West that AFC West that everyone thought has
Right.
like 2-1 teams, but also has an 0-3. Like they like that there is this much white noise and fuzz around it because it means going into every game, you don't know who's going to win. You can't just pencil it in and just clap your hands and call it a day. And that makes for good football because at the end of the day, everyone feels like they get a chance, they get a shot. And I think that ultimately makes the professional game interesting.
It does. We're seeing it here in the NFC West. Everybody thought, the Seahawks were going to be far and away the worst team in the league, doing what they're doing right now personnel-wise. But yet, San Francisco 49ers lose their starting quarterback. They've struggled.
By the way, shout out to Dan Viens.
The Rams are 2-1. Yeah, right. The Rams.
Dano took a victory lap after that game.
Came along. Oh, he's the happiest guy in the league last week. Somebody came along and took some of that off of his plate. And I love Orlovsky's breakdowns anyway. But no, nobody thinks the LA Rams are going to run away and crush the NFC West now. It's only a game. Any team, the Detroit Lions, do they feel like competing in that division is out of the question if they put things together? Like, do the Green Bay Packers seem insurmountable?
No, they don't seem insurmountable. I don't think the Detroit Lions are getting up to the top of the NFC North. It would take a very quick turnaround and a lot of injuries healing. However, the NFC North at this point, I feel like it's either the Packers or the Vikings. I think it's the Vikings I think it's the Vikings who have really stamped themselves because that's a good offense. That's like a really, really good offense. The Packers, I hadn't thought that it's too bad for the Packers, and to be honest, I'm still not terribly worried about them. I don't think losing Davante Adams hurts them as much as people think. I think I think if anything else, it's their lack of run game right now, success-wise, that has kind of hurt them more than Aaron Rodgers not having Davante Adams. I will say, at 2-1, the Bears are the most fugazi team I've ever seen. Period.
Yeah.
Like that Justin Fields was running for his life every game, and I don't understand how they picked up 2 wins. Like that first game against the 49ers in the rain feels just insane.
Yeah,
and
that
then
was just ugly.
I guess you get to pick up a win over a Lovie Smith team when he kind of outfoxes you to go for the dub. I mean, for the L like that. But I don't expect the Bears to really be in contention. And like the Lions, I'd love to say they're NFC North contenders. Maybe we'll see as the season progresses, because again, Dan Campbell does not really accept this idea that this team is rebuilding and they will fight hard as hell, because that's basically a sales pitch to any player who wants to come play in Detroit, is go out there and play hard as hell. And he gets it in guys like DeAndre Swift, who running backs coach, assistant coach Deuce Staley has been all up in his face this entire offseason, getting him to like, hey, don't cut outside, go back inside, don't run out of bounds, like keep pushing for those extra yards, even if it's going to hurt a little bit. And Swift took that to heart, because Swift is a Philly boy at the end of the day. And or guys like Amon-Ra St. Brown, who is literally giving you De'Ami Brown's stat line, because De'Ami Brown went before him in the draft, just because Amon-Ra St. Brown has no damn chill whatsoever. No chill whatsoever. And I love him for it. I've loved him since USC. And the man just is a no stop, won't stop. And yeah, this entire offensive line, Penei Sewell plays with aggression. Aiden Hutchinson plays with aggression, but it's a team in his image. It's not. I don't think it's a complete image yet, but as I tell fans, these things take time. It takes time to get good players. It takes time to put things back together. It took the Bengals 3 years, and I think they were ahead of schedule when they went to the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
So like I think that these things take time for the Lions, and you kind of expect them to just compete and fight hard in a lot of these games. But I'm not expecting the sky right now. I'm certainly not expecting the NFC North. I can't tell. Lions haven't won the Lions didn't even win the NFC North when Matthew Stafford was here.
Yeah.
Like it's been a minute. Just well, I think the Lions can get there, but right now I'm not ready to prognosticate.
Well, it could be an entertaining game, 10 a.m. Pacific time on Sunday. Chris, thanks for joining me, man. It was great talking to you and getting an inside look at what's going on there with the Lions, and we'll have to do this again sometime.
Absolutely, our lovely. I know you and I are both West Coast people, and we will enjoy getting up early. I work overnights the night prior too, so getting up early for Sunday is always a chore. But it's football, damn it, and I don't have many of these, so I will enjoy everything I can, and I am more than willing to come back anytime to talk about this bizarre team that I've staked my entire life around and has unfortunately infected half my family into watching too.
He is Chris Perfett. That's ChrisPerfett on Twitter. You can follow him there. Check out his podcast content. I am Dan Viens at Seahawks Forever on Twitter. I'll be back with you after the game on Sunday for my instant reaction. Until then, thanks again, Chris. Go Hawks. We'll see you next time. Cool, man. Thanks.
I apologize. That was kind of sweaty of me. I was probably. I think probably.
We're only in 720p, so I think you're okay.
Yeah. No. I'm not sweaty like that, but like I was just kind of rambling a bit. But I thought.
Oh, it happens.
So could you hear the fan? Like you mentioned something about the AC early on.
At a certain point, I could. I'll do a little noise reduction.
Okay. It was a fan.
It wasn't distracting at all.
I thought I had bought this thing. Like this thing usually gets cut out when I'm on Zoom, so I'm just kind of used to like running it in the background anyway.
And then at one point, I wasn't sure if we were having an earthquake or
no. There was a garbage truck going. I live right next to the alley, so there was a garbage truck going.
But I think that'll work.
And I closed the door, but then I locked my cat outside, so I had to get up and let him back in. As you see him there, like
mine's in the bedroom. Like I thought I could trust him. He's only 7 months old, and the first couple times I tried to do this, he was all over me. But like now he pretty much chills when I do stuff.
I wish this guy was small enough where he could be all over me. That'd make for a great Twitch stream to have a cat like.
I know, right? Make him a character in the show.
Well, I mean, people can redeem channel points that we have to do cameos of our pets because we're all pet people. We got two, the other two hosts have dogs, and I've got this big fat cat here who's followed me since living in Georgia. But yeah, no, this was fun. I hope everything was appropriate there. I wish I could have focused more on the game itself, but.
I think and I'm always my thing about these is like, especially when you get with someone where it's an easy chemistry, is like I don't mind going off on tangents and going other directions. That's why I asked some of the big picture questions, because I'm just curious. So I figure if I'm curious, maybe some other fans are too, because you can break down. I've got there are guys out there that do podcasts, and I have them on the show sometimes. They're like heavy X and O.
Yeah, and I'm not that person.
I'm not either. I'm more
I'm
of
a radio guy.
360-degree view and just kind of looking at storylines and
yeah, I'm the same way. So that this was good then. Yeah.
So. Well, I'll get this edited up. It'll probably be posted in about a half an hour. I can send you the link if you want, or you can just
absolutely. And if you tag me in a tweet or something when it goes out, I will I'll be sure to jump on and make sure it gets out, and we can probably even retweet it from Pride Detroit at some point too. So
cool. All right, man. Thanks a lot. Enjoy the week.
Thanks, man.
All right, brother. See you.